Welcome to Whiskey One, the channel for the novice, the curious, and the connoisseur. I'm Whiskey One, and today we're going to feature our top 5 whiskeys of 2021. Stick around. All right, whiskey fans, so thanks for checking us out. Welcome to Whiskey One. And 2021 wasn't exactly a very busy year for us on YouTube, but we were very busy actually on Instagram and Facebook. So I want to first start out by saying if you enjoy watching whiskey reviews, you want to gain a little knowledge about different whiskeys, what different ones have to offer, which ones are good, which ones are bad, I highly suggest that you check us out there. First things first, I tried to pick 5 different whiskeys in each unique type of category. And I wanted to find something that really stood out, was unique. It was different from all the rest. The other criteria that I selected was not that it necessarily came out in 2021, but either it was released in 2021 or it had a chance to finally taste it in 2021. All right, folks, so let's just go ahead and just jump right into it. Starting with, of course, a rye. You can't talk about whiskey without at least mentioning rye, a truly American staple, right? And so in particular, this year, we found that there was a unique rye that stood out the most, and that was the Barrel Seagrass. Now you're talking about a rye that is basically finished in a Martinique rum, Madeira, and apricot brandy barrels. Now in particular, this is basically like a barrel strength type of rye, and most of Barrel's whiskeys are like high proof gems, if you ask me. And I really like this one. I felt that it was a standout. It packed a lot of fruit flavor, a lot of bold flavor. We're talking apricots, a little bit of cherry fruit, and you got nectarines, you got all these different type of orchard fruits that are just layer upon layer within that whiskey. And in particular, I liked how also it was spicy and a very, very long finish. And I really like it because it just stood out as a really unique gem. All right, so on to our next whiskey, which is made by Distillery 291, and it's called Bad Guy. And it's basically a wheated 4-grain bourbon, and it's bottled at 57.8% alcohol. Now, why did I like this one in particular? Well, first of all, let's talk about the distillery itself. It's a craft distillery based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and they have a very unique approach to their aging process. Yes, they age it in oak, but they add these aspen staves within the barrels just to give it a little bit more complexity. And what I can tell you is that almost every single one of these bottlings are just packed with seasoned oak and this very unique tinge of aspen, and it's just packing a lot of bold flavor. Now, the Bad Guy is more like a orange creamsicle. Of course, it's got like your black tea notes, and it's got your nutmeg and baking spices, you know, all of your winter spices that you would expect during this time of year. Now, the unique thing about this as well is that this is an annual release, so it's not something that you see all the time. They don't offer it like all throughout the year. So this is like the poinsettia of whiskeys. And so what I liked about it in particular was just that from the time that you pour it, you smell all these rich and bold aromas. And I could tell you this is one of those that has a very, very long finish, gives it that Colorado hug, and just holds on for dear life. So our next bottle is an American single malt that's been finished in a stout cask, and that's by none other than Westbrook whiskey. And what I like about this bottle in particular is that it stood up to a lot of the expectations that I had. And most people, when they think about a whiskey that's finished in a different type of barrel, they don't really think about a stout cask. And so most folks are taking a stout or a different type of beer and they're aging it in a bourbon barrel or a rye barrel or another type of whiskey barrel. And they sort of did this in reverse. And I thought that was really cool. I didn't know what to expect. But what I can tell you is that this is like a buttered pecan that's covered in chocolate, or a praline, if you will. And I really like how big and bold this was, especially for the fact that it wasn't like bottled at barrel strength or cask strength. This is a 46% ABV bottling, And you can still find this. This is readily available throughout the year. And that's one reason I particularly like it, is that this is not just one of those one-time hitter quitters, right? So if you're ever curious about a good American single malt, I highly suggest the Stout Cask by Westbrook Whiskey. Now our next whiskey is Laphroaig. Now this one in particular is their 2021 Cargis that basically took their Laphroaig and aged it in Pedro Jimenez casks. Now what I really like about this bottling is that every time I go to the airport and I'm looking at the duty-free shop, most of the time I'm not flying or traveling internationally, but I'm always jealous of the bottles that I see there. And in particular, they have the Pedro Jimenez cask that is usually offered in their 1 liter sizes. But of course, you have to travel internationally to get it. Now, 2021 didn't exactly see a whole lot of international travel. And so what I think happened is because of COVID-19, less and less people were frequenting those duty-free shops, and they probably had to do something with all those bottles. What I think happened was they decided to take that and run with it and basically release it here in the United States at cask strength. Now, in particular, this is bottled at 58.9% ABV. And what I can tell you is that it didn't sell short. It is so tasty. And I'm already a fan of Laphroaig. And most people think of Laphroaig as being ultra peaty, ultra smoky. And what I really enjoy about this is just that it's well blended. It's basically a masterful expression of not just peaty and smokiness, but fruitiness. All of that flavor from the sherry casks really worked well here. I mean, they did a stand-up job. And this is one of those bottles that, yes, I do have a backup, of course, because one must have one for something like this. And what I really like about it is that, one, well, as expected, yes, it does pack peat smoke, but it's got a whole lot of berries, raspberries, blackberries that you would just imagine sitting on a smoker, developing some of that smoke flavor, but being very fruity, luscious, sweet, savorful. And of course, being Laphroaig, you also get those cured meats, the brine, the sea spray, all of those things that I really like about it. And of course, that beautifully long finish. Our next favorite whiskey comes from Texas, and of course, one of my favorite distilleries. Now, what I'm about to show you is not necessarily something that most would imagine. It comes out with the peat, the big peat, right? And what I have here is the Balcones Peated Texas Single Malt. Now, what I really enjoy about this bottle is the fact that I think when people are trying to do something like a peated expression or peated whiskey, and they come out with this unique product is, well, let's do it big, right? And Texas certainly does it big. But what really blew me away was the one thing that didn't dominate the room or push all the other players aside was the big P. No, in fact, this is one of those whiskeys that I fell in love with right off the bat. I am a peat head, so I definitely favor peated whiskeys, but this wasn't this big peat bomb that just slapped you around in the face. No, this is one of those that had layer upon layer upon layer of complexity. Just different flavors that are fruity, smoky, savory. I'm talking, meats that were resting in the smoker and just kind of cooking up for hours, of course, but this had dried raisins and had these dried prunes and raspberries and different fruits that you would expect from like a sherry cask. And what I really liked about it was, again, they didn't go big with their peat or anything like that. It is there and it's definitely noticeable, but it's a well-balanced dram. And in my opinion, this is my favorite out of the entire 2021 year. Now, the only thing that I regret seeing is that this is not something that's regularly available. This is a limited release. Of course, this came out in 2020, but what I will mention is for years, I've been hunting this bottle, desperately trying to find it online because I know that unless you travel to Texas, you're probably not going to get it. And luckily, I was able to find it in Denver, Colorado, so I did have to travel around just to get it. But once I got it, I stocked up, if you will. Now, I couldn't exactly do a top 5 video for the year without having at least one honorable mention. And that honorable mention is none other than one from Law's Whiskey House. So Law's basically pulled out all the stops for their 10-year anniversary. And what I really like is, of course, their beautiful packaging. And this is the Law's X Origins. Now, although this is a very limited release, I, of course, had to do an honorable mention just because of how big and flavorful this was. And honestly, this is just a special whiskey for me. I've been a fan of Law's whiskey for quite some time now. I travel to Denver quite often just to visit the distillery, get my hands on limited released Law's bourbon and ryes and of course all their different variants. But one thing that I really liked about this one was the care and the thought that they put into this release in particular. And of course, as you can see, beautiful packaging. I actually got this during their 10-year anniversary release party. We were able to hang out and talk whiskey with Al Laws, of course, the owner of Law's Whiskey. Now, one of the things that I tried not to do in this particular video was feature a lot of whiskeys that you're never going to come across ever again. I wanted to at least showcase some that you are going to still be able to find on shelves. You may have to hunt just a little bit, but you are going to be able to find these. But in particular, this one may not exactly be available, and that is why it was an honorable mention. But of course, why? This basically checked every single box for me when it comes to bourbon, black tea, molasses, spices, a ton of baking spices, and of course everybody thinks of oak when they think of bourbon, but we're talking like a beautiful medley of seasoned oak and a lot of bold spiciness that comes with it, but not something that was so overpowering that it just felt like an oak bomb. No, this thing is special. The only thing that I will say about that is once you've reached a certain peak and you've tasted greatness, especially a 10-year bottling that you may not see again, is you're going to ask these guys to do it again. And what I hope they do is eventually get to a place, and knowing that this is a craft distillery, that they get to a place where they can put out year after year a 10-year bottling of bourbon or rye or some other whiskey. I've watched this distillery grow over these last couple of years, and I really see these guys do a ton of great things, a lot of special experimentals. You know, they're not afraid with trying different things, and in particular they put out really solid products, and year after year I'm just blown away by what they do. And so again, I had to do an honorable mention for this, and this is a special bottling. So that about wraps it up for our 2021 year. We did a ton of reviews on Facebook and Instagram, so if you could check us out there, follow us, of course. You could see our formal reviews on each one of these bottlings. We go into great detail on what we found and why we liked them. And one thing I want to mention is, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that like button, comment. Let us know if you have a whiskey that you want us to talk about next, or even do a formal review, or do a head-to-head comparison. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. We appreciate all the love and support that you guys have shown us throughout this last 2 years, and we want to just continue to grow. One last thing I want to mention is we have started our website at whiskeyonechannel.com, so check us out there. We plan to do different write-ups and of course visit different distilleries, and we'll be expanding, of course, the channel. So hopefully, again, you're not new to the channel, but if you are, always remember this: it's about the one you enjoy. Cheers.
Shut up and sit down.